the big machine. We got together and organized, holding high our union dream. We carried the load solid and strong with a working woman's pride. We see the wrong, together we'll change it. We won't keep our anger inside.
Hi, can I help you? I hope so. Come on in and sit down. My name's Diane.
My name's Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne. Do you want to tell me a little bit of what's happening for you?
Well, I've been having this problem at work.
What kind of a problem?
Well, there's a lot of men where I work. Well, for instance, like, we have coffee delivered to us on this little cart in our floor, and I'm way down at the end of the hall, so by the time I get there, all men have already gotten their coffee, and they're standing around in little groups talking and stuff, and they often make, like, really dirty jokes, or they'll make rude comments about the clothes that I'm wearing or the way that I look, and it makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Sure. Have you told them that you don't like what they're saying?
Well, I told them that I didn't like comments like that, and they just laughed at me. So I went and complained to their boss, who was also my boss, and he just said, well, you know, what's the matter with you? Can't you take a joke, and don't you have a sense of humor? And it's just gotten to a point where I don't go for coffee anymore.
Okay, I want you to know that it has nothing to do with your sense of humor, and that what's happening for you is happening to hundreds and hundreds and more women out there every day.
Where I worked was, most of us were women, a couple of men on staff, and they were making up stamps to stamp on the back of the bills, you know, please pay your waiter, and they made up these stamps, please pay your waiter, and I asked the boss how come they didn't make up please pay your waiters, as we outnumbered the men. And he said, okay, I'll make up some for you. And he had up a stamp he made up, and it spelled WAITERASS, waiter ass. And I said, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he said, well, I think it's pretty funny. You wanted a stamp, especially for you women. Well, there you go. And it's what are you going to say? You know, you either tell him to shove his job or...
I worked for the credit union. I was the general manager's secretary. And one day there was a member in his office. Of course, all the filing was in his office. And I needed a certain file, and I was bending over it was a small filing cabinet, one of those that you reach through. And as I bent over to get the file out, I was obviously in the way of the computer, which was behind me. And he said to the member, well, when Maria gets her tits out of the way, I'll give you your balance.
One instance of something that used to happen was that the men would be having a meeting. There was 15 men in the office, and I was the only woman. And they would be having a meeting in the manager's office. And I remember being called in, and he would say to me, do you know anything about this, Diane? And would point to something on his desk. And of course, I would think that it was about work, and I would look and there'd be pornography pictures laying there, and I, of course, would get quite embarrassed and would rush out of his office back to my switchboard, and they would all laugh. And I I recall other instances, of course, of dirty jokes and remarks, and if I wore a skirt, they were very short then at that time, about being encouraged to wear them and how wonderful I looked and how great it was to see me dressed properly. I knew that something wasn't right, you know, but I was so happy that I was actually, that they were talking to me, that they were treating me like one of the boys, because there was no other women in the office. And the first week or so that I was there, I felt really, really isolated and wanted to be part of what was happening in the office. And so when this kind of thing started, it seemed to me like it was the only way to be part of it. And so I can remember feeling almost relieved to think, finally they've accepted me, you know. They started telling me dirty jokes and going on like that, and so it was like being accepted and made to feel okay about being there, you know.
Well, I was a research clerk for the provincial government, and there was this man in the office who was a professional in his middle 30s, and he worked near to my desk. I wasn't actually involved in working with him, but he was in the same area. And he was constantly making smart sexual remarks to all the women in the office and brushing up against people in the Xerox room and that sort of thing, you know. And people were getting pretty fed up with him, but nobody had actually done anything about it. I'd said a few things to him once or twice, but he kept doing it. And one day I had to go into his office area to look at a map. I was leaning over a desk looking at this map, and I felt his hand come up between my legs and grab me in the crotch.
I was getting off work early, and there was only me and my boss left in the restaurant. He was waiting for me to go so he could lock up. And he kept propositioning me, saying, you know, let's go for it and everything. And I kept resisting him. I said, no, I don't want to. I don't want to get into anything like that, you know. And I tried to get out of the door several times, and finally he led me by the hand, took me into a back room, and kept saying, you know, all these things over and over again. And he held my arms apart, and he lifted up my shirt, and he started to caress my breasts and everything.
Example, there was a man at work that when they found out that I was a lesbian and came out in the open and everybody knew, he came up to me one night and asked me, I hear you're a lesbian, and I said, yes. He said, well, I go for threesomes. Do you think you can find a girlfriend for one night? And I went, huh? And I said, sure. I said, what's your wife doing? I'd love a threesome. And he just stomped off very angry. When it was his wife that I wanted, then it was really something terrible. But that kind of a harassment I'm very open to.
Historically, it is clear that the framework for sexual harassment was established centuries ago. Women have always worked. They have been the producers of both the children and many of the material goods needed by society. In the pre-industrial period, a woman's workplace was in her home. They were weavers, spinners, and the producers and preservers of food, as well as being healers, wives, and mothers. Although having the skills of the craft gave women some autonomy over their lives, their labors, bodies, and spirits were largely expropriated by their male relatives, church officials, and middlemen merchants. The Industrial Revolution saw the erosion of what little control women had over their lives. Early mechanization of producing goods forced women and children out of their homes and into the factories, which were controlled by male entrepreneurs. Their crafts were taken from them, their skills were made obsolete and replaced by an assembly line that now catered to the demands of a world market. Women and children lost control over the products of their labor as they became the lowest links in the process of mechanization. Women became even more vulnerable to men as they worked long hours in factories while still being held fully responsible for the maintenance of the home and children. Already conditioned by male domination, women were assimilated into positions where they not only had to work in filthy sweatshop conditions for less money and status than their male counterparts, but they were also coerced into giving bosses, supervisors, and co-workers alike the many services they had provided in the home. Women feel the needs of a system that is reliant upon a passive, expendable labor force. A woman, solely because of her sex, was and is required to submit to sexual harassment and discrimination in return for economic survival. We immigrated to North America with dreams of a better life, only to find that we, along with Native women, were faced with the same alternatives we had in our homelands: domestic drudgery, factory filth, or prostitution. However, there was one new field open to us. We were now allowed to service the growing bureaucracy of a capitalist system that required clerical workers for its banks, stores, and offices, and these menial positions were quickly allotted to women.
How has this kind of harassment affected you?
It's affected my relationship with men. I have a lot less trust in them. I have a lot less respect in them. It's made me fight more, angry, very angry at society and making us put up with it, teaching people to do this has got to happen.
5 days later, I got fired for no reason at all.
First thing when I got into the office, I told my supervisor, who's a woman, and we were quite good friends. And she was just as angry as I was. And so the two of us sat there over coffee and plotted how to get back at this guy. And what we finally decided to do was to plaster his name all over the building warning women to stay away from him. And also to give him a bad name in the process, you know.
I went to the police and put in a statement. He said that he could go talk to my boss, but it really wouldn't do any good because it was my word against his. There were no witnesses. But he said that if he got another complaint, that then he could do something about it, But my statement was sort of the beginning of it, you know.
How did you feel about that?
Discouraged. I wanted something to be done, and it really couldn't be done, you know.
I don't feel as bitter or as unhappy about it as I did at the time, except that it has left a scar, whereas I just can't see myself working in an office any longer. You know, I feel that I should almost automatically expect this kind of treatment, and I can't any longer be humiliated and shamed as I have been at this credit union, and therefore I've taken the course, as a matter of fact, to change my lifestyle because I can't stand working in an office anymore.
What would your advice be to other women?
Fight it. Get up there and scream and yell about it. Let it be known that they don't like it. Do as much as they can to publicize it. And they have a choice if they can. There are a lot of women that can't, of course, because it means their job, especially single parents, that have to support children. They have a mouth to feed. But the other women get up and scream. Talk about it. Discuss it with other women. Get as much publicity about it as possible. If we scream loud enough, it's got to stop.
Well, my advice to other women would be that rather than sit quietly and take this sort of harassment, they should speak to anyone, but in particular to their boss or whoever is causing the problem, and tell them straight out that I object strongly to the way you speak to me. There is no need for you to talk to me in this manner. I don't talk to you that way. I show respect to you. Why can't you do the same for me? Just simply not take it. And if that doesn't help, well, go somewhere. Any organization, talk to somebody else and get advice somewhere, but don't just keep quiet about it.
Our union probably represents the largest number of working women, unionized working women in British Columbia. And as a result of that, we've always recognized problems of women on the job and represented them. And this would include problems of sexual harassment. In April of 1979, however, the union adopted a specific policy regarding this issue. Sexual harassment can range from sexual innuendo to physical assault. But as a union, we're specifically concerned about any incidents on the job which could have an effect on a woman's economic security. Anything that could affect her promotional opportunities, her job performance, her job security. And any incidents of that nature, a union has an obligation to protect their membership and to represent them specifically in those areas.
Sheila, why do you think sexual harassment clauses should be in union contracts?
Well, from what I've seen of sexual harassment on the different campuses I visited and worked at, I think it's really a serious problem that women have to start looking at. And I think one of the hardest things that we have to see is that it is a problem, that it can come in very subtle forms where a woman can be commented on about what she's wearing, or the fact that she happens to be wearing lipstick that day, or, oh, so you do have a dress, do you? To more kind of avert things like it's sexual overtures, invitations, inquisitiveness about their private life or their home life. And I think once women start to realize that that's not friendly banter, that it is not necessary, that we will be getting together and making some changes and getting contract clauses that will provide avenues to resolve that kind of harassment.
Do you have any advice for other women?
Well, I think for organized women, if they have problems with sexual harassment on the job, they should be approaching their unions for advice. For officers within that union, if their union does not have a policy specifically on sexual harassment, they should work towards the implementation of that policy within their own organization. For unorganized women, the only avenues open to them would either be to approach human rights or to try to resolve the problem themselves on the work site. And sometimes the most effective ways of doing that would be for the women to get together and to discuss the problem before they take any kind of action, so that if they do take an action, they have the support of all the women in that work location, because that seems to be the most effective way of reaching a successful resolution of the problem, namely women working together, supporting each other.
The advice that I think that I would like other women to take is that we should get together and start talking about what happens in our job besides, how much typing we have to do in a day. I think we have to start talking about the subtle kinds of sexual harassment and the overt kind, and pressure our negotiating team and our executives to take a serious stand on getting articles in contracts to provide protection. I think it's essential.
What is most needed when we're out there in the workforce is some validation, is some support that what is happening to us is actually sexual harassment. We tend to believe that unless it's really taken to an extreme, that we don't know that it's sexual harassment, which includes comments about our dress, comments about just being women, dirty jokes, pictures, the little friendly moves against you, the arm around your shoulder, any of those kind of things that we, if we say anything about it, it's, oh well, you're making a big thing out of nothing. So the most important thing to do is find a place where somebody is going to say, yes, it is happening. Yes, you don't have to put up with it.
Often find us in diving pools and occupations we do not choose. You see us We carry the load solid and strong. We're the working woman's party. We see the wrong, together we'll change it. We won't keep our anger in some party.